everybody. My name is John Brewer. I'm a historian. I teach at Harvard and at the California Institute of Technology, two rather different kinds of institutions. And thank you all for coming. This is a sort of Dido and Aeneas evening, really, torrential rain. And it's a remarkable tribute to the nature of this program that we've ventured forth. I want tonight to ask you to imagine the world of the 18th century listener, not just the performer, but of the young grand tourist. And this means that we need to think not just about singular works of brilliant music, as we're going to hear, but also about the environment in which they were heard, different from this concert hall, and also the attitudes that listeners brought to them, the pieces. That way, we can reconstruct the musical experience of the Grand Tour. Here we see a young grand tourist. We'll say more about him later. But what's important is to reconstruct this experience, and it's notable that grand tourists from Northern Europe going to Italy, they all spoke of Italy as a land of music, and they meant by that not simply that they heard things in concert halls, cathedrals, or in the opera house, but rather that they heard songs and dances on the streets and on the canals, the gondoliers in Venice, or the so-called lazzaroni, the poor in Naples, or the small bands of wandering musicians that you could find in almost any major town in Italy in the 18th century, playing on a small stage to a public for a relatively small amount of money. It's a tour of sounds. It's said about Naples that you could hear the city before you could actually see it. Now, famously, the Grand Tour refers to the journey undertaken in the 18th century by wealthy, usually aristocratic young men, about 17 to 25, accompanied by a tutor who's often referred to as a bear leader, as an educational rite of passage between school or college and full adulthood, marriage and public service. It was a sort of liminal time, rather like a gap year, at least that's what we would say in Europe. And its itineraries varied very considerably, as you can see here, but basically there is a spine that runs from the northern Europe and from the Channel right the way down into Italy and terminates at Naples. Its itineraries varied, but they certainly included the cities that we're going to be dealing with tonight, musically Paris, Venice, Rome, and Naples. Now, young male grand tourists were by no means the only genteel travellers. There were older single men, gay couples, women who wanted to live a cheaper and freer life, and later in the century there were many more family parties on the Grand Tour. But the archetype was the young male. But the Grand Tour was by no means the only educational journey that was undertaken in this period. Musicians, as we'll see, artists and architects, all travelled for improvement and advancement. Something's... there we are. We lost Il Sassone, as the Italians called him, the Saxon. One of tonight's composers, or arrangers at least, Johann Adolf Hasse, he was born in Hamburg, but he studied on a grand tour that took him to Venice, to Bologna, to Florence, and Rome. And he spent the rest of his life shuttling back and forth between Dresden, where he had a court appointment, Venice, and Naples. The Venetian songs that he arranged and that we'll hear this evening were first published not in Italy, but in London. So the important point really is that the producers of music and art were every bit as cosmopolitan as their patrons. But wealthy grand tourists travel not to learn a technique, like a musician, or to further a career, but rather to shape an identity, to shape a masculine persona. It was very gendered in that way, the young men thinking themselves as masculine, and achieved through a combination of what was described as taste and virtue. The idea was that by looking into the classics and Roman antiquity as models of proper conduct, you would learn to think classically. Grand tourists saw themselves very often and described themselves very often as more Roman than the Romans. They're modern Romans anyway. Rome was the seat of the ancient empire, of course, and of the Holy See, and that was the pinnacle of their tour. But Naples, if I can get, with its sites of Vesuvius, I hope you can see it smoking in the background there. You're not allowed to smoke. It was its southernmost destination. That people love to see both the volcano and Herculaneum at Pompeii. They used to say you can see both the killer and his victim. So travel was intended to provide an education that created a certain kind of gentleman. Now, it's important that the kind of gentleman that you should be was a patriotic cosmopolitan. Now, that sounds like an oxymoron. The important thing was that you imbibed these international values and international taste, but at the same time, you retained native loyalties. You still thought that home was better. And we'll see. So the tour for these young men was exciting, but it was also dangerous, and it was fraught with ambiguity. The young, impressionable tourist could fall prey to foreign effete manners, strange religions like Catholicism, bad politics like absolutism, and moral depravity. He could, in the language of the time, become effeminate and unmanly. It's terribly gendered, all of this. A figure embodied in the macaroni on the right, who's returning from his grand tour to the horror of John Bull on the left. The macaroni as fashion victim, a person who's been seduced by all these foreign styles and manners. But the point for our purposes is that music was at the heart of this ambivalence between antique manliness and modern foreign manners. And we need to bear in mind really that there were two grand tours going on simultaneously. One looked to the past and the other was actually lived in the present. So the official curriculum of activities for the young grand tourist was very much built around studying and collecting art and antiquities. And if you could get some, you could take them home and put them in your country house and so on. This is the famous image at Zoffanis Tribuna, where if you can, it's a not very good slide, but you can see the young men admiring the various classical sculptures and paintings and sort of. It's a pastiche, bringing together a lot of tourists with a lot of works of art, not all of which were in that particular place. It was either that, or it was looking at monuments, classical antiquities like the Forum or the Colosseum. Now this activity was all about getting past the present, avoiding the present in some way, swimming actually into the past, and getting beyond an era that was regarded as decadent or as an era of decline, back into the past of antiquity and of the Renaissance. Here we have views of the grand tourists on contemporary Italy. I particularly love the quote, "Italy would be a delightful country if there were not so many Italians." This was all about getting back to the past and getting past the present. So the heroic past was safe territory, a place where good lessons could be learned. Much more dangerous was the contemporary world. Courts, living cities, entertainment, theatre and music, realms that were associated with play, license, seduction, the real world of the grand tourists. So here you see the grand tourist arriving in the centre of Rome, immediately confronted by all kinds of hucksters and salesmen and musicians and so on, offering Cicerone, offering guidance and so on. Now music falls into this realm of danger, and it's for this reason that although there are many, many published accounts of the grand tour, there are remarkably few that talk very much about music. When Charles Burney, the musical historian and the father of the novelist Fanny Burney, published his first musical grand tour in 1771, he complained bitterly about the absence of any information about music in earlier grand tours. He said, music still lives in Italy, while most of the older arts only speak a dead language. So why aren't they there? but that was precisely the problem. Music inhabited a present and was largely absent from the antique past. So Burney ended up being very defensive, pointing to the traditional view that music was harmonious and orderly and encouraged positive social virtues, and denying that music encouraged idleness or depravity. So you can't learn much, Bruce, about the Grand Tour. I'm just terrible on technology. Was this absence in accounts of the Grand Tour because there was no musical activity? No, absolutely not. There were lots of opera, public concerts, theatrical music, sacred singing, private performances. They were all brilliantly woven into the fabric of the Grand Tour. So if there's so much activity, why is it neglected and overlooked? And the answer is that the great fear of the parents of these kids on the tour was that the seductive powers of contemporary Italy, which, although they included gambling and a certain kind of seduction of fashion, was primarily focused around Italian women. And here you see the danger of bewitching sirens who fascinated young men if they were not upon their guard and so on. This was sexual anxiety. And the problem was that music and sex, for all the attempts to sanitize music, were inextricably connected. Dancing, passion stirred by music, the sexual ambiguity of the castrati, the sexual attraction of dancers in the theatre and the opera, the license afforded by the practice of wearing a mask and masquerade so you wouldn't be identified when you were misbehaving, the ubiquitous presence of prostitutes at public performances and the boxes in the opera. All of these threatened the nobility of the opera and the order and harmony supposed embodied in music. What families feared was the grand tourist contraction of an undesirable disease, or even worse, an undesirable alliance. And both were likely to occur within the context of the musical world. Now, of course, sorry, I'm making it sound terrible now. Of course, the musical experience of the Grand Tour was varied by place and genre. Paris, which was normally the first stop on the tour, was the first that we're going to hear tonight, its greatest musical attraction was the opera, which was famous for its, I'm sorry, it's an absolutely terrible slide, famous for its formal dances, its fabulous sets, its elaborate costumes, its whole kind of panoply of spectacular absolutism. But many considered the music to be old-fashioned when compared with that of the Italian composers like Vivaldi and who's on the left, the rather older, distinguished-looking gentleman, or Pergolesi, who died so young, on the right. This kind of new, more vivacious music from Italy. After the performance in Paris in 1752 of Pergolesi's comic opera La Serva Padrona, a vicious war broke out between those who supported French music and those who supported the Italian opera. And it's a struggle or tension that Quentin's concerto, which is one of the first pieces we'll hear tonight, seeks to mediate, gesturing both to a more sober French taste and a more vivace, lighter Italian style associated with such composers as Vivaldi. Now, Venice, though closest to Paris, was usually the last destination of what was a kind of a tour, is something that goes around like that. The last destination, a city whose decline as a great port was concealed by its status as a city of pleasure. The city enjoyed an exceptionally flourishing musical scene. Grand tourists eagerly attended the many opera performances and music in the playhouse, but also they attended the four weekly concerts of the four conservatories in Venice, where young girls were trained as singers and instrumental performers, and who in turn performed both sacred and secular music, moving between the church and the theatre in a way that we might find rather strange. Rousseau, in the 1740s, describes his reaction to all these nubile young girls. This is Rousseau's typical reaction. I have not an idea of anything so voluptuous and affecting as this music. It's not clear whether he was referring to the music or the young women. So Venice was notorious as the most wicked city in the Italian peninsula, where Lent was a brief respite between carnival masquerades, and where in the Ridotto, a government-sponsored gambling, dancing and mask intrigue, they all went hand in hand together. Young men knew of its vices and were drawn to them. Venice was where, in the famous phrase of the novelist and extremely grumpy traveller Tobias Smollett, the grand tourist was, quote, pillaged and poxed. Lord Lincoln, a passionate dancer, he'd been dancing with the King of Naples in a kind of all-male ball before he arrived in Venice, was seduced by the Venetian dancer Signora Lamberti, who swindled him out of 12,000 guineas. The travelling companions, James Boswell, a famous author of The Life of Dr. Johnson, and Lord Mountstuart, a Scottish aristocrat, shared the favours of a Venetian opera dancer, but they also shared the pox. So where there was music and dance, there was pleasure, but there also lurked danger. So as you listen soberly to the first pieces of Quentin, Hasse and Vivaldi, bear in mind that the circumstances and feelings that surrounded this music were very different from how they are today.
In questo tempo felice io penso solo a te, perché ser teco non dice ninfa dietta, perché in questo tempo felice io penso solo a te, perché ser teco non dice infadietta, perché stringe il sposo il caro seno nel tuo fossi io così vorrei amarti, non mento, ma quando mi dirai di sì, quando mi dirai di sì, stringe il sposo il caro seno nel tuo fossi io così vorrei amarti, non mento, ma quando mi dirai di sì, quando mi dirai di sì. Cara mia Ninetta, so che ti ga un giardin che non ti la vita, se ti me vuol son qua, se ti me vuol son qua per lavorarlo. Mi sono un giardinier che se fa il mestier, per te farò di cor su quel che parlo, per te farò di cor su quel che parlo. Mi sono un sardinier che sa fare il mestier, per te farò di cor su quel che parlo, per te farò di cor su quel che parlo, per te farò di cor su quel che parlo. Se mi t'adoro, cara, te diga che te obetta, te diga che te obetta, ti sei la mia diretta, la già desto cuor, la già desto cuor, creder no dia vogliesto, l'amor che ozzura tanto e me gramazzo pianto, me moro da doglior, me moro da doglior, crederti no vogliesto, l'amor che ozzura tanto e me gramazzo tanto, me moro da doglior, me moro da doglior.
So, between Paris and Venice, there were trips to Rome and Naples. You went from Paris usually to Florence, to Rome, to Naples, and then back up to Venice at the end of the tour. But in between we have the sites of our next pieces, Rome and Naples. Now both of these cities offered the visitor a rich array of sacred and secular music. Contemporary Rome, and many people don't realise this, was seen by many grand tourists as a rather grave and sombre place. Lots of priests, lots of antiquities, lots of courses that they were asked to go on by their tutors that they found intimidating. These blocks of marble or whatever which they didn't understand. What they really liked was the diversion of music. There was sacred music performed all over the city, in St. Peter's itself here, in many of the city's churches and oratorios, and outside Lent, Roman nobles and cardinals, very often more or less the same person, supported a very lively concert life. The enormously influential composer and violinist Arcangelo Corelli was patronised successively by the Cardinals Pamphili, in whose house he lived for a number of years, and then by the rather lecherous Cardinal Ottoboni. Opera, though sometimes frowned upon by the papacy, nevertheless flourished. There were two major opera theatres in Rome, including this, the magnificent Argentina. It's a pity that you can't really see the remarkable detail in this. In Naples, which we remember, Naples is the third largest city in Europe. Only Paris and London are larger. And there were no fewer than 3 different opera theatres in operation in the 1720s in Naples. The Fiorentina, with its comic opera, which was, the libretto was in the Neapolitan dialect, comic opera in the local dialect. The Teatro Novo and the Teatro San Bartolomeo, which was the official court theatre until it was replaced in the 1730s by the theatre that is still there today, San Carlo. This is an absolutely enormous theatre by the standards of the time, with 6 tiers, which is one of the wonders of the Grand Tour for many of the visitors. And composers and performers moved repeatedly between Rome and Naples. Scarlatti, for example, worked in both. This is a rather grand portrait of Scarlatti. But the point is that Naples was in many ways the real powerhouse of music. There were 4 conservatories in Naples. Unlike the ones in Venice, which were entirely populated by women, these were entirely populated by men, including quite a number of castrati. The numbers of pupils at any moment in time ran into the hundreds. They came to study in Naples from all over Europe, and then they were dispersed throughout the continent after their instruction. So that's one of the reasons why very often this is referred to as a Neapolitan style or a Neapolitan school, although scholars argue a lot about how Neapolitan it really was. But there were over 100 confraternities in the city of Naples who sponsored all sorts of liturgical music. Most famously, the confraternity of the Madonna of the 7 Sorrows, I don't know how many sorrows we're supposed to have, commissioned the famous settings, which almost everybody has heard, of the Stabat Mater by Scarlatti and Pergolesi. And the most important opera librettist of the early 18th century, a poet called Metastasio, began his career working in the theatre of San Bartolomeo in the 1720s. So you have these 2 sites, but I want to emphasise that grand tourist music going was never simply confined to the church, the conservatory, the theatre and the opera house. Grand tourists were not just listeners, they were also those who practiced, promoted and participated in music. They attended and even participated in private concerts known throughout Italy as accademia, where bands of different sizes, often with a mixture of amateurs and professionals, performed together. So here we have the Gore family, who lived for some time in Florence with George Third Earl Cooper, playing a concert together with Fiesole in the background, although they were supposedly in Fiesole. In Naples, the famous or notorious Sir William Hamilton, his first wife, not Emma, who rather eclipsed in all sorts of ways the first wife, Hamilton's first wife was a harpsichordist of great distinction, much admired, and also a kind of impresario in her own right, who organised quite a number of concerts bringing together. And in fact, Mozart at one point played with them during his tour in Italy. Small concerts, there are also balls, if we could get that, held in the palazzi of the great, such as the room of the Roman prince Ruspoli, the hall in Rome in which these events were held, and which brought together Roman society and grand tourists. Grand tourists were notorious actually for hanging out together in their own linguistic groups and not mixing with the. One of the really important things, of course, about music is that it is a kind of universal language which can cross these barriers. Many music tourists also collected musical scores. So in his program notes, which all of you should read on the subway going home, and Andrew Appel reminds us that there were two famous grand tourists, the poet Thomas Gray and the aesthete Horace Walpole, brought back to England a huge pile of scores, 10 volumes altogether, which were then played in the houses and drawing rooms of England. And it's interesting that Vivaldi, despite his fame, Vivaldi was always worried about money. He never quite had enough. And he was not so keen on his works being published because he wanted to sell the manuscript scores to tourists. He would seek out tourists in order to enhance his income. And the point is that these were all being circulated and sent abroad outside Italy. Equally important, of course, was the way in which grand tourists brought important Italian musicians out of Italy. To give you one, there are lots and lots of examples of this phenomenon, but a group of visitors in Venice in 1734 were so overwhelmed by the performance of the superstar castrato of the day, a man called Carlo Boschi, also known as Farinelli, that's his stage name, that they paid for him, they brought him to London to sing in one of the two London opera companies. So what does this tell us? So although there were only a few people like the earnest Dr. Burney who actually went on a grand tour in order to pursue music, music was nevertheless an integral part of the lived grand tour. So through the patronage of composers and performers, the purchase of scores, and their own amateur performance, grand tourists played an important role in promoting the European-wide fashion for Italian music in the 18th century. And regardless of whether he and his fellow travellers shunned or embraced the illicit pleasures that I've alluded to of the grand tour's musical scene, the range of musical possibilities in different cities available to genuine musical enthusiasts, like the young John Montague, Baron Montague of Broughton, was really remarkable, and as we are seeing, also remarkably varied and disparate. Rome and Naples may have been famed for their antiquities and their arts, But as we're about to hear in the work of Corelli and Pergolesi, their contemporary music offered every bit as much pleasure and instruction as ancient monuments and dusty excavations. Thank you.
As an interesting fact, I am reading directly in a reprint of the first edition of Corelli's Opus 5 in Rome. So you see it's richly engraved and entitled, and so this is the real thing.
Del sa non ver, se a me non lice piegar del fato il braccio, onde risani la cruda piaga d'Euridice in seno, onde pietà non si intende amore, se invan sospiro, invan mi crucio e piango. Ma che dissi, che finsi, un tanto vetto chi non provò, chi non intese ancora di natura e d'amor le voci, i modi. Angue traspiri sia tra ircane selve, feroci tigre, o tra numide arene, sian indomite belve. Ditelo voi, che trasse amor tra l'ombre, pallida amica turba, e Vandro, Fedra, e tu prode da casto, e voi compagni, si può tra i rai del sole tornar così? Chi può senza il suo bene trarre i giorni odiosi ed ispirando vivere per amare, amar penando? Di cielo